I want to thank everyone once again for being here. So this is the agenda for today. So we have the Q&A section as well, and also we'll cover some apprenticeship resources available towards the end, and then obviously we'll look to close at 1 p.m. Okay, right. So I'm quickly going to go into the background to labour shortages in the early years. So hopefully you can all see this clearly, and obviously you've also, you can hear me. So just if we take ourselves back a little bit to where this all started, if you can remember the date quite clearly, the 23rd of March 2020, it's one of those days that will be forever etched in probably most people's memory, certainly in my memory. The 23rd of March, you sort of remember probably what you were doing, where you were that day. I certainly remember where I was. I was actually in an educational environment, being told that we were likely to be going into lockdown, which at the time it appeared to me like it was a joke, but obviously it proved not to be a joke, and actually very, very serious. And this has really led to obviously the world being turned upside down, and literally so, because what happened with the pandemic and with COVID-19 and the disease and the virus is essentially what you had, that something that's probably never happened before, certainly not in living memory, or certainly not in more than a generation, where you had both the demand side of business, the supply side, and the economy pretty much shutting down all in one go. That's very rarely happened. When you go back to the last financial crisis in 2008, 2009, you had one part of the economy shut down, but the other part was still open. For COVID-19 shut everything down. So that is, I don't know, that has rarely happened. That's never happened before. So this was a seismic event which changed everything. And yes, we would desire to go back to that pre-pandemic world, and a lot of people obviously are very keen for us to go back to that pre-pandemic world, but there's no question that things have changed, and not everything will go back to that pre-pandemic world. Some things will stay, and some things will have to change, and that will be, probably going forward. So these are some of the COVID-19 situation, obviously the pandemic, it changed the labor shortage. Because what you had a situation where the pandemic led to not just a global health crisis, but a global economic crisis, and also a global job crisis. So you had the triple whammy, really. And so this affected everyone. Every industry was affected. So that, it was obviously going to affect those in education, and obviously, like I said, I was in education at the time. And so it was a massive change for everybody. Funding. So again, I'm kind of focusing on what's the background to the challenges within the early years. And I'll just cover some of these very briefly because of time. Funding is something that historically has been an issue. With underfunding, and not enough funding has been provided. So this is also another factor, and it's a historical problem and a historical challenge for the industry. It probably accelerated some of the impact of the pandemic is also because, again, people have had time out. We've had a whole year out where most people had to stay at home, even those in education, because you remember back in the day, soon not long after 23rd of March 2020, most of us had pretty much, even those in education had to stay at home. So everyone's had to reevaluate their situation, their life, had to balance work and life, but also businesses. It's a time for businesses because it's not a one-way situation. One of the key issues that's affected the early years sector is also the fact that, I say valued there, so there's an image there, it says valued, but the sector is perceived as, and these are professional people within this sector saying this, that they don't feel valued, they don't feel appreciated. And no one wants to be in that position, regardless of what job you're doing. We all want to be cherished, we all want to feel special, want to be loved and cared. We might say that's a utopian ideology, but at the end of the day, it's important and it's key to the success of our economy and our business and so on. So these are some of the big shifts, and people have had a time to think about this and what matters to them. I'll share some surveys and some information with you later on, but I think it's Newland, who's the CEO of the Early Years Alliance, who talked about the sector, the early year sector, going through essentially a crisis. The sector is going through a crisis right now. I've recently been having some meetings with employers, and they're saying the same words are coming out of their mouth. It's a crisis, trying to find staff, trying to keep staff. The other background to this whole labor shortages in the early year sector is around demography. Because when you look at it and you think about it, and I've worked in all sorts of industries, recruitment and so on, and when you look at a sector especially, you find the sector's only probably tapping half of the labor market. Now, that's not something that's the industry's fault, but that's the reality. Because one of the things you will see in the presentations that are coming up is majority of the people that are working in this industry are female. And I remember a story, and the way I like to present is I like to share some personal stories, and it's just, I think sometimes you get more value out of that. My son, who he's now at secondary, he was at school, and I think he was attending, it was a Saturday school. And it was an afternoon or an event that happened where he came to me and said, "Well, Dad, I just found a male teacher in our school." And it was a shock on his face, almost like that is almost unheard of. And obviously it's not the case, but there was a demography challenge around, in terms of the population of people who are working in the industry. So that's another background to the shortages. Because if you look at other sectors, that's not generally the case. You have access to the wider market, and we're going to look at how we can, how the sector can actually, look to widen its pool of talent. So this is just some highlights, because we could spend hours and hours probably just talking about these 4 areas, but because of time obviously limited, I just wanted to highlight this is part of the background to the labor shortage in the early years industry. So I'm just going to move on to the next slide. Okay, so this is the report I was sort of alluding to earlier. So this is an Early Years Alliance report. I think it was issued in around October of 2021. I've got a reference there at the bottom of the slide. And it talks about some, I'll leave you to read this at your own pace, but I'll just pick out 1 or 2 points here. The first line or first sentence there about more than 8 in 10 settings, children's settings, are finding it difficult to recruit staff. I think this is a report that Newland, who's the CEO of the Early Years Alliance, that obviously commissioned, came up with, this is what they found. I think there were 1,400 respondents to that survey. And the next one is talking about over a third of respondents are actively considering leaving the sector. So this is a huge, huge challenge. And just in my few meetings with employers, this has been confirmed. Now, some of the things I'm going to be saying this afternoon is not to alarm us, because these things have happened in other sectors. And I've personally seen it, having worked in so many different industries, but it's important to be aware of it now and look at how we tackle this I think the term now they use, because this is part of the whole being valued proposition. The industry actually would like to be called early educators, early education. So again, this is part of the whole, the language. I mean, there's a whole language piece. How do you change the language? How you engage the community or that group, that early education community. So this is a breaking point, the challenges that face the sector. Okay, right. So this has also led to other impacts on the early years sector. Because of time, I'm going to limit the amount of time we spend on this. I mean, we can devote probably a full hour just on one of these sort of topics. But the Great Resignation is a phrase, and again, like I said, this is not to alarm our stakeholders or our staff members or people in general, but the point is about being aware of what's going on out there. One of the things that the pandemic has taught us is that you can't do things in isolation anymore. You have to work in collaboration, and this is how essentially the pandemic has been handled. So the Great Resignation, this is a term that was coined by Professor Anthony Klotz, who's from Texas and A&M University, and he's an organizational psychologist. And it was a prediction that there was going to be a huge amount of people leaving the work industry, and it actually came to pass. So apparently in the middle of last year, 2021, something like 4 million people left their jobs. But the Great Resignation, it was not just a one-way street. It was a mixture of people resigning, but also being asked to leave as well, because also companies have had this time to determine who they want to keep in their businesses. So the Great Resignation is another seismic shift, and it's happening on our shores. There used to be a phrase I heard many, many years ago when I used to work in the financial market industry, that when America sneezes, the UK catches a cold. Whether that's true or not is arguable, but there are similarities, and often it pans out to be the case. So it's also led to hybrid working. I mean, more people are looking for flexible working. This is something that was already happening, but again, what the pandemic has done is accelerated the demand for hybrid working. There's another thing called hybrid hiring, where now, if you look at your local area, people are not just looking to recruit from their local areas, they're looking to go outside of their local areas to recruit, because they call it hybrid hiring. It's difficult for the early years sector, because typically in the early years sector, you're looking for people who are local, who are closer to the place. Often that's what most businesses want. So therefore, hybrid hiring is a new thing. And actually there was a report that the chief executive of Hayes is one of the global recruitment companies, one of the biggest recruitment companies in the country. So it was a report they mentioned about hybrid hiring is something that companies should be embracing. Very difficult for early years sector, but hybrid working is where you have this flexible situation where some part of the week people are working from home, part of the week people are working in the office. Again, very challenging for the sector, but there is an increasing demand for this. And it also, lastly, employee well-being and mental health. In fact, some people are calling this the next wave or the next pandemic. One of the things, I actually wrote some articles about this, back in 2020, around talking about the next wave. This could well be the next wave, because we've had a massive reawakening, really, of some of the challenges that people are facing within the earlier sector, but also across other businesses as well. So people really now focusing and now appreciating how important employee well-being is, and mental health, and making sure that it's something that's addressed. This is some of the things that have been impacted or have affected the earlier sector, and obviously some of the challenges around trying to find staff. This is part of it. And again, there's so many things we could have brought up this afternoon, but I just thought I'd highlight some of these key points. Carrying on, we've got some stats and news here for you. So again, I'll let you read some of this, but I'll just pick out one or two. Okay, so the first one is in 2019, 44.5% of the early year professionals said in an education policy institute that it was supplementing their income with tax credits and state benefits. It appears, obviously, this is an industry where there's been, and actually this is something, again, I heard just last week, actually, visiting some employers, where there's this challenge around pay, in a nutshell. It's an issue around pay and paying people in comparison with other sectors. And it goes back to the value. Then we've got to ask ourselves as a society and as government and so on. We've got to ask ourselves. And this is something, again, this is the sector talking. We are part of that sector. We support the sector. We work in the sector. But this is what the sector is saying, is that they don't feel appreciated. And finance is obviously a big part of it, especially when you think about what's coming around the corner. In April, we've got another triple whammy. We've got, gas prices, energy prices going up. We've got the national insurance contributions going up by 1.25%. They're talking about that adding as much as £225 to people's bills, and that's actually the very minimum. Some people are talking about up to £700 to people's bills. 6 million households in the UK could be affected. Then you've got also the inflation situation. So you've got another triple whammy there happening. So this is a sector that has been really hit hard by what's going on around the world, and in the UK especially. Obviously, that's where our focus is. Just pick out another couple of key headline stories there. 96%, again, I've mentioned this earlier, of the earliest workforce are female, 40% are under 30. Yeah, I think generally, traditionally, in education, I've worked in education myself a long time, going back the last 10 years. Many of you here are all educators. It is the sector, that is the sector. But what's interesting about that particular line is the fact that 40% are under 30. That stood out for me. Why? Is because that group generally is what you call the millennials. They are the millennial generation. And when you look at what millennials are really looking for, the key things that stick out are around flexibility, purpose, and meaning. And obviously, they're looking for, money is obviously important, but those two key things, they're looking for purpose. Purpose is a big part. And as I've said before in the presentations, that this is not just a one-way street. As much as staff work for us, the workforce are beginning to re-examine their situation because they've had the time to think about what they want in their lives. It's also a time for employers to also think about what they want as a business, the type of person they want in their organizations and so on. So it's a two-way street. But obviously, a very famous American executive once said, all businesses depend on three things, or can only survive because of three things: people, profit, and product. People obviously absolutely crucial. So getting that people strategy right is absolutely fundamental. So understanding this demographic, again, we're going to come back to that word, demographic of under 30s, 40%, almost half of the population of people who work in the sector. And many of you will testify to this as well on this call, that is the case. It may well be different in certain sectors or certain areas, or depending on geography. But yeah, it is generally young people who are working in the sectors or the millennials. So their needs and their wants are different. So again, it's something that the sector needs to pay attention to, and it's really about paying attention to some of this changing behaviors and so on. A lot of information there. I'll leave for you to read for a few seconds, and I'll move on to the next slide shortly. We're hoping to do more of these sort of events going forward. In future, we certainly want to get more speakers from across industry, from within Prevista, sharing their experience, because there's a lot of expertise in-house, but also expertise out there as well that we'd like to bring and present to our communities. Okay, right, the next slide I'm going to move on to quickly. This is some quotes. Some of you might already know. One of the things I certainly love is I love quotes, and I think words are very powerful. And this is a quote from James Reed. He's the chairman of recruitment group Reed, one of the biggest companies or biggest agencies in the country. I think in 2019, they had a revenue turnover of around about 1.1 billion pounds. That's significant. So they know one or two things about recruitment. Currently, best time in 50 years to apply for a job is what James Reed said. Whether you believe it or not, the fact is, this is a significant statement from the sector or from the recruitment industry, who are a significant part of the British economy. So it's important to pay attention again, but again, this is again why there's a challenge in the sector. And again, it kind of goes back to what I was hearing in just a few days ago, being out in the field, going out into the field, speaking to our employers. These are some of the things I'm hearing back. It'd be great to hear your views. So if you've got any questions, please put it in the Q&A box, and we'd love to, hear your questions. We want to certainly have some, interaction towards the end and get your views as well. But this is what James Reed said. I think I've got another quote for you here. So this is Dr. Maria Montessori, probably the most famous early year educator, I think going back 150 years. This is what she said. She said, "We must accept adaptation as the basis upon which we can build a concept of education." And the key word for me there was adaptation. And this is, I think, certainly one of the things you've heard over the pandemic. The key words that have jumped out over the last couple of years is, pivoting, repurposing, adaptation. These are the key words that have come out over the last couple of years. So, and it's incredible. This is what was being said by Dr. Maria Montessori over 100 years ago. So it just shows this is very pertinent to our sector. And I think we might have at this point now. Yeah, okay. So again, a lot of the things I've just shared there is a little bit alarming and a bit concerning, but there's always hope. There is always hope. I mean, this is very much a candidate-driven market right now. You speak to anyone in this industry, outside of this industry, this is what they're going to tell you. Certainly for people looking for work, and this is why the sector is struggling and finding it very tough. As a training provider, we have solutions and we have support in place to help organizations. And we're going to share some of that in a minute. But I just want to reinforce again the fact that there is hope. The market will get better. It is always cyclical. You have a candidate-driven market, and you always have a situation where it's an employer market. And I think the key is about getting prepared, get ready for when the market rebounds. The theme of National Apprenticeship Week, which is now celebrating its 15th year, is about building a future. And I don't think we can, to get to the future, you need to prepare for it now, rather than wait, next year or the year after. It's about preparing for it now. So it's getting ready for that rebound, because it will rebound. There will be a change, and it becomes an employee market again. So it's about preparing for the future, and that's part of why we have this preparation or webinar for you. And obviously this is an ongoing thing. This is just a start of hopefully many opportunities to engage and learn from our community. And I think the next slide is where we have Jo Newland, and a member of the quality team, to come in.
Okay, so I'm Jo Newland, and I'm a head of quality and curriculum. So I just want to sort of go over sort of a few things with you in terms of sort of getting it right with our apprentices. So on the call, we have got panelists from the skills team, Kathleen and Kathy, and from the quality team, Susan Feltham and Sam Isaac, all with extensive knowledge and experience within the childcare sector. Also as well, we all champion apprenticeships. Myself, many years ago, I was an apprentice. So, I really, want to sort of promote apprentices in terms of what they can do for your business. And they're your future growth. We do really need to sort of cherish and nurture our apprentices. And going on from that, also as well, not much to sort of celebrate from the pandemic, but I do want to share this with you in terms of, despite the pandemic, we have had learners achieving their apprenticeship extremely well and within sort of the required time. So there's a significant amount of learners that have remained in the sector. They've been promoted, they've had pay rises, they've developed new skills, they've developed confidence, they've improved their learning, their communication skills, their team working skills, and they've been given greater responsibility. And also as well, they have a clearer idea of their future and how they can reach their future goals and targets. And how do we know that information coming through? We had an external company complete a progression survey for our past learners that have just completed. And these were the things that were coming out of that survey, promoting learners saying that they, achieved their apprenticeship well, they're passionate about it, they've had their pay rises, they've gone on to the next level of qualification, they've been given greater responsibilities within their work placement. Whilst COVID has been negative, apprenticeships are still happening. Our learners are still learning, they're still engaging. In the second lockdown, our learners were still in placement and they kept things going. Children were still going into nurseries, they still needed that care, especially for our key workers. So it is really something to celebrate in terms of, despite the pandemic, our learners are still achieving and achieving well. So just to go back to sort of basics in terms of the apprenticeship standards, and they are very different from the frameworks. And it's all about working with you, the employer, to find the right candidate for your organisation, but also as well before the learners start in terms of doing an initial assessment to ensure, the learners complete initial English and maths test. We know that they're on the right level, and we know they're going to be able to fulfil the standard at the organisation. So then on programme, learners will work towards completing a full qualification, and this may include English and maths, and IT, depending on whether they have achieved the right grade coming in. But also as well, every apprentice must spend at least 20% of their time on off-the-job training. And I'm going to come back to this because I think this is sort of a big stigma with regard to apprentices in terms of employers having to release their learners in order to do the 20% of the training. So once they're on programme, they then go through to Gateway, and the employer and the provider of the learner, you know, as well as the tutor, must deem that the learner is ready to go through to endpoint assessment. The difference with standards is to ensure that the learner has the occupational competence, not just the qualification, it's around the occupational competence. So it's not just pulling off at once they've got the qualification, it's seeing the standard all the way through. So they go through to the Gateway and then they complete what's called an endpoint assessment. All learners need to complete the endpoint assessment, which will comprise of a mixture of assessment methods, such as doing a project, an interview, a practical assessment, or skills test. And then completion and certification. Following the completion of endpoint assessment, learners will be signed off and receive their certificates. They are then deemed as occupational competent. So throughout that journey, you know, we have responsibilities, the learner's got responsibilities, the employer's got responsibilities, as well as the tutor. It's about monitoring the learner's progress through every step of the journey, ensuring that their milestones and their targets are met. The learners are making effective progress on their apprenticeship, and they're developing knowledge and skills that they can put into practice in the workplace. And also as well, it's about the employer having a clear understanding of the learner's progress and what they need to do to achieve their apprenticeship standard. As I've said before, it's not all about a qualification. So in terms of, as I said, in terms of the competency and the training and the 20% off the job, some of the ideas with regard to off-the-job training is face-to-face tutor-led delivery and coaching sessions, participating in online forums relevant to the learner's role and industry. Now, some of this, you know, they could be doing another project within your organisation. Individual study time, whether it's to complete coursework or review modules, this is all part of 20% off the job training. Also as well, completing workplace reflection diaries. They can be a mentor. They can also as well complete project work, as I said, for their apprenticeships, prepare for assessment, role plays or simulation of work situations, helping to embed their new knowledge and skills. They could visit other businesses or different business units to see how they work. They could attend competitions, providing it's work relating and helping learners to develop within their course. They can also as well attend trade shows, and particularly where they may be able to watch presentations or seminars relevant to the learner's role and industry. Workplace one-to-one performance conducted by the learners and their line managers, attending webinars, listening to podcasts on hot industry topics, and then stating in terms of how that's relating to their work. Training sessions, e.g. manual handling or first aid, but this, you know, needs to be connected to the standards. What it isn't is training that takes place outside the apprenticeship's working hours. And unfortunately, English and maths up to level 2, which isn't funded separately. Also as well, progress reviews or programme assessments that are required in the apprenticeship standards aren't also a part of that 20% of the job. This is part of the apprenticeship and an important part of the learners completing their standard. And it's about us recognising the importance of the 20% of the job and the learner being provided that time to do what they need to do as part of their apprenticeship. Also as well, it's understanding the learners' starting point, to ensure the learners have the same opportunities to learning, planning with the employer, the learner's individual learning experience. So therefore, it's about taking an individual through the apprenticeship, through the standards, identifying, skills gaps within your work settings. What are the learners going to be doing? So therefore, we can seamlessly support that learner through the standards. And also as well, it's about the provider providing the learner with high quality of teaching, learning and assessment. So therefore, they're developing skills and knowledge, what we require within the industry. But also as well, in terms of the quality team here, we see quality as a golden thread that runs through the entirety of the learner's journey. And we have a quality team that is continuously reviewing, improving and developing quality. So therefore, we are putting the learner and the employer at the heart of the quality of education. As you are aware, you're also externally monitored by Ofsted and their new education inspection framework. We also have the awarding bodies, as well as the SFA and other stakeholders that we have to conform to. At the end of the day, we're receiving public funded money and the learners need to have a good quality of education. So it's all about promoting sort of apprenticeships, and they're your future workforce in terms of developing them and growing your own staff. So therefore, it's about sort of growth, and how can Prevista support with your recruitment of apprenticeships to grow your business? Where are your skills gaps? How can we support? Do you need any additional apprentices, or with regard to certain qualifications or skills gaps you're missing? So in terms of opportunities, we're launching a level 5 standard in early years practitioner childcare, and this replaces the level 5 and young people family manager. We're also working to develop partnerships with schools to deliver a teaching assistant apprenticeship as well. And also as well, we want to work with our partners and community groups to support learners and employers with achieving their key objectives around upskilling and the retention of staff. We're keen to promote advanced training. So therefore, again, identifying your skills gap in terms of what do you need. Could we support with paediatric first aid training, alternatively baby massage, etc. So how can we support? And don't forget, some of that can be classed as the 20% off the job training. So it's all about National Apprenticeship Week. It's all about celebrating our apprentices. And as I said previously, it's about nurturing them, supporting them to achieve their goals. Because as I said, at the end of the day, they're your future workforce. Thank you, Femi.
Thank you so much. That was really comprehensive. But I'm glad we're recording this because I think we need to share this with employers who've not been able to attend this session. I know we've got a number of, I think if we calculated the years of experience on this call, I think it will go past the century. So there's a huge amount of experience. And I'm just so grateful for that wonderful contribution from the quality team and the curriculum team, teaching and learning, and obviously everyone who's present here today. It's amazing, really, and important that we celebrate apprentices. Obviously, as Jo said, she started out as an apprentice. I think there was one key thing that she mentioned there for me as well. In addition, I actually was writing lots of notes there. I scribbled about half a page of notes and around the skills gap. This is one of the key areas that apprenticeships can help you with. In fact, I know of an employer who I met not long ago who uses apprentices or uses this opportunity to really support, to recruit and retain their staff. So this is a strategy that employers are using right now, and it's something that we can all do or use or utilize. So thank you so much from the quality team, from Jo, for sharing that amazing information with us this afternoon. So I noticed we're coming up to close to 1 o'clock. So we're actually doing quite well for time, 12:45. So we've got another 10, 15 minutes to go. And we want to take some questions. If there are any questions, please put them in the Q&A box and we'll wrap up shortly. Okay, so I'm going to quickly move on to the next slide. The next slide, I will sort of not whiz through them, but I'll kind of go, touch on these because again, a lot of this particular section we could devote essentially an hour to. The 4 steps to turn the Great Resignation into great re-engagement, and this was something I picked up from the Forbes Business Council, and it's a membership group of top organisations and businesses around the world and in the UK. Forbes obviously a very famous name, and so this council very, very interesting. It's also we've been talking about the Great Resignation, a bit alarming perhaps, but what we really want to do and where we want to be at is the re-engagement, and this is really for the employers. This is for the employers because we've been talking about how this is a great time for workers, and it is, but also it's also an opportunity for businesses and our early education community to be attentive in these sort of areas. So how can you go from great resignation to great re-engagement? Now, so we just highlighted 4 here. There's so many that we could have gone through. I think Jo actually gave some great examples and some suggestions. One of the ones that I picked up on what she said about mentoring. I was just listening to the Mayor of London yesterday. Apparently, they're talking about trying to assign mentors to every young vulnerable person in London because obviously there's this whole sort of endemic situation around knife crime and so on. Mentoring is huge. I certainly know from working with young people generally, mentoring is a huge factor. So yeah, that's a great example of where something that can be deployed within businesses to recruit and retain staff. So quickly, I'm just going to go through the 4 steps. So the first one is conduct stay interviews. Now I'll move on to the slide. I'll just cover these bits very briefly. Conduct stay interviews. Now, I have to be honest, this was new to me, and I try to cover as much as I can news-wise, and I get all sorts of publications through my little box every week, and I'm a bit of a current affairs junkie, as you probably might have gathered. But this was new to me, and I've never had people are familiar with current exit interviews. That's very common. We all have them, or most people do. But to have stay interviews. So the idea behind this is that as people resigning or leaving your place of work for whatever reason, the people that you have in your company as an early year education community, one of the things that you could be doing is actually looking at conducting stay interviews. Now, this obviously requires a level of trust because if you want that openness and that transparency, then you have to be prepared to listen and listen to your staff and your workers. So stay interviews is something that I think is refreshing, and it's, I don't know how many people do this or people have experienced this. I can't recall. I've worked for all sorts of stuff, probably working more than a dozen companies, and I've never had that personally. So I think it's a great idea. It's a great suggestion. So conducting stay interviews. That's one. So this is one, we kind of alluded to this already and talked about this very briefly. And this is the focus around shifting from recruitment to training. So when you have this whole atmosphere of resignation, people departing, people not staying, just I think yesterday or the day before I spoke to a nursery setting, and the manager told me basically this one of the members of staff has left, and she may not be coming back to the sector. So this is real. This is real. This is real, and this is happening at alarming rate. I think whereas an early year education provider, where you can start to change and utilize the apprenticeships and the support provided through Prevista as an organization, is looking at the apprenticeship, because as Joe said earlier, the apprenticeships were brought in to fill the skills gap. This is why you have what's called the KSB, the knowledge and skills and behaviors. So what are those knowledge, skills and behaviors you're looking for in a role or in a particular role for your organization? So you can design that, you can work on that and have an apprenticeship to support you in that area. And that's what an apprenticeship will offer you. It will offer you those, or your staff, your apprentice, work opportunity, qualifications, skills, and obviously focusing around career. It should be a career focus. And this is actually an area that, again, I came across when doing some research for this presentation, is we need to look at the early education as not just some kind of ad hoc thing. It has to be seen as a profession, as a career industry, where people actually look at it as a place where they can actually build a career. So we talk about career pathways, so how they can try and progress within these environments. Okay, right. This is, as you know, I love quotes. I'm a quotes junkie. I love them so much. I actually put together a book on quotes, and you can find it online if you want to search for them. This is one of the best quotes I've found on this particular topic around diversity and inclusion. So Verna Myers is an influencer. She's a strategist. She's an expert in this area around diversity and inclusion. I was at a meeting in 2020, and it was organized by a top financial organization. And the guy who was talking, was from Oxford, I think, or one of the top institutions. One of the things he said, not long after the pandemic, because it was not long after that we had the race awakening and all the stuff that was going on in America, and obviously we're still seeing all this stuff still happening today around this whole awakening and making people more aware of what's happening around us. So what this person was saying on this call was that every board that he was speaking to had diversity and inclusion on the agenda. Every board. This is an important time to really, as a word I think I often come across, is be intentional. So it's a difference between just saying it and actually doing it. So intentional is actually the doing part, as opposed to just saying it, because everyone says it. We've been talking about this for God knows how long. Certainly, throughout my whole lifetime, I'm sure, and before. So the point is about the intention to actually make change and do something. So this quote, I think, is perfect, really, in terms of summarizing. Diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. I thought it was a wonderful quote. And she says, better yet, inclusion is organizing the party together. Yeah. So again, there's no question about it. They do say, when people come into an organization and they can see people like themselves reflecting in senior positions, it helps with retaining people. It helps with recruitment. These things is what's out there, and it's been spoken about. So I think this is another area that organizations within the early education sector can certainly utilize to help themselves in terms of developing their retention strategy. Okay, right, we'll move on. This is also an interesting one. So this is about, again, so we're looking at strategies that the early year education sector can use to recruit and retain staff. And actually, like I said, focusing probably more on the retaining staff is key going forward. Invite your staff to become co-creators. As someone who's come from the sort of higher education background, this is something I hear a lot, co-creation. So where you co-create a curriculum, you co-create with students, with other stakeholders. I think this is what, and apparently this, again, an analogy that I came across was the IKEA effect. The IKEA effect was around, apparently, people love the whole sense of being able to build their stuff together. So it's not just sort of given to them or download to them. They create it. So it's called the IKEA effect. You can look this stuff up. But the co-creation is around, again, working together. We've said those sort of terms and words together. So it's about working together, providing solutions or coming up with solutions as a collective. So these, again, strategies to look at how you can go from the resignations to the re-engagement. And this is all about re-engagement, because as much as workers and people in general have had to rethink their lives and their work and their purpose and meaning, businesses are also going through this right now. Businesses in all sectors, early years especially. So this is a time to also to realign, to rethink about how you move as a business going forward. Okay, well, I think we're coming towards the end now. So again, just to reiterate some of the benefits of an apprenticeship, it's a tool to develop skills and retain existing employers. It's a training opportunity for new entrants to the sector. So the early years education sector, there's a gap between the amount of people who are skilled and qualified. So and we've got at Prevista, we have a number of programs, and we're looking at different initiatives to support new entrants to the sector. So this is an area where, again, we can co-work with organizations within the earlier sector to look at solutions, how we bring in new entrants, using apprenticeships and also things like traineeships, which is something we haven't really spoken about much today, but that could be something for another time. But certainly these are opportunities to really co-create and work together, tailor-made to the knowledge, skills. I mentioned this earlier. So the idea behind an apprenticeship is if you've got a particular skills gap, again, Jo mentioned this when she was speaking about focusing the attention or designing an apprenticeship around the gap that you have in your business. And obviously it's an opportunity for people to earn while you learn. The apprenticeships actually, despite the fact that, there's been drops in terms of sign-ups overall as a country, sign-ups in general, when you look at the figures, there's been generally sort of fluctuated, but there's also popularity growing. There's a popularity growing around apprenticeships. So this is a great opportunity to work with a training provider to boost your retention and your recruitment of new talent. Okay, so I think this may well be the last slide, and we'll take some questions. We may well go over the hour, but I would like to finish very soon. So employment incentive, this is, again, just a reminder. So again, this is one of the things the government introduced sort of in 2020 to kind of incentivize people and businesses to get involved in hiring an apprentice. So employers can apply for a £3,000 grant. So it's not a loan. Essentially it's yours for new apprentices with an employment start date between a certain period. And we actually are in a window right now. So if you've got an apprentice with you who started their employment between the 1st of October and January 31st, but also then started their apprenticeship between the 1st of October and the 31st of March, you'll be entitled to receive the £3,000. It is the employer's responsibility to apply for the incentive using the apprenticeship service account. As a training provider, we have our team here, the employee engagement team here, who will support you in terms of that process. But the responsibility falls on the employer, and we do send out reminders to our employers to let them know about when these incentives are coming up. There is talk about this may well be the last incentive. I have heard from lobby groups and organizations such as the CBI, who are talking about trying to get the government to extend past the May deadline. So we'll just have to wait and see. This could well be the last window opportunity for employers to claim any form of incentive money. But it's a great opportunity, again, because it's money you can use to support your business at this very, very important and delicate time. Okay, and that is it. So I want to say once again, thank you for everyone really who's contributed and all of you who've attended this webinar. It's the first, of 2022 year. We're hoping to have more, and actually hopefully in person. We can actually meet people and actually talk to our employers and learners in person. So if there are any questions at this time, I don't know, do we have any questions at all? No. Okay, I've got to know. Okay, right. I just want to say thank you so much again. We're able to wrap up within the hour, so that could mean we wrap things up pretty much soon. But I just want to say it's been a wonderful opportunity to engage both staff employers and learners and stakeholders who've had the time been able to find the time to attend. We're very grateful for your time. Like I said, we want to do more of these sessions because I think this is one of the ways we want to be able to reach out to employers and various stakeholders, because I think together is the way that this is how we're going to be able to address some of these challenges, which are acute and really pertinent to the early years sector. But we believe in by working together, we can certainly start to address some of these problems. We know certainly from some research that was done for this particular webinar, you know, we know from young people, for children who do not get that support, you know, they by the age 5, I think it is, they start to fall behind their wealthier peers. You know, the inequalities and gaps start to grow. So addressing these problems now around recruitment, retention of staff, there's knock-on effects for society at large. So this is a big issue beyond probably the webinar that we shared today. But I just want to say thank you once again. I will stop the slide. I think I've got a thank you slide here. Actually, we've got a resources page. Actually, there was one more page. So the resources is obviously something that is available. I've just got a couple of links there. The apprenticeships.gov.uk has got comprehensive amounts of information around recruiting, benefits of hiring an apprentice, and the incentives as well. And obviously the Prevista website, which has got lots of information. And this is constantly as well being updated, where you'll find much more information as well going forward. Obviously Kickstart, traineeships as well, just to mention a few other programs that we're working on and supporting our communities. Okay, thank you very much. And good afternoon. I will just stop this now. I'll stop the share. I'm not sure there's any questions, but just want to say thank you so much again, and enjoy your afternoon. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone.